Rachel has the night off. Okay, remember summers? They used to be so light and fun and relaxing. And for the news business, super slow. Well, not anymore. Now summer's just another season in the reality show we're all trapped in together. For example, the U.S. House of Representatives began its 6-week summer recess at the end of last week. But just today, 3 more House Democrats made public pronouncements that they are now in favor of an impeachment inquiry regarding Donald Trump. Now, if you add them to those who announced their support this weekend in the wake of Robert Mueller's testimony last week, the number of lawmakers calling for an impeachment inquiry is now over 110 and quickly approaching half of the Democratic caucus in the House. And we're going to speak live with one of those 3 members of Congress who announced their support for an impeachment inquiry today, very shortly. But starting tomorrow, all eyes in the political universe will not be on Washington, but on Detroit, where 20 Democratic presidential candidates will be participating in the second primary debate over the next 2 nights, and particularly because they will be meeting in Detroit, not just a major American city, but a majority black city. The Democratic candidates will doubtless be pressed to respond to the latest racist attack from the president they hope to defeat. Donald Trump's weekend tirade, which continued into today against Congressman Elijah Cummings and his majority black Baltimore district, calling it a disgusting rat and rodent-infested mess, is now as routine and predictable as it is outrageous and ugly. Trump singling out a lawmaker of color, attacking a majority black urban area after being tweaked by something he saw on Fox News, and projecting his own qualities onto others, calling Congressman Cummings racist and a bully. It's also clear by now that this is how Donald Trump intends to run for a second term. Whether you think this is intentional political strategy or he just can't control himself, the racism, the xenophobia, the stoking of people's worst impulses, this is the Trump 2020 campaign. Not the economy or jobs or some normal political thing. It's just this, which means that even if we wish we could just ignore Trump's provocations on a day like this, we cannot. And so we're going to talk more this hour about his vitriol, and we'll be joined live by the Reverend Al Sharpton, who came to the defense of Cummings and his city and earned his own attacks from the president for that today. And also by Michael Steele, the former lieutenant governor of Maryland and former head of the Republican National Committee. The 2 of them came together today to defend Baltimore. But on a day like today, when so much oxygen is being eaten up, and understandably so by what the president says, it's important to also pay attention to what the president is doing. One of the things we learned from the Mueller report is that lock her up was not just something Donald Trump said at political rallies to get the base all pumped up. Once he became president, Donald Trump really did try to get the U.S. Justice Department to go after his political enemies, calling the Attorney General at home to tell him to, quote, direct the Department of Justice to investigate and prosecute Hillary Clinton, meeting privately with the Attorney General and telling him that, quote, the Department of Justice was not investigating individuals and events that the president thought the department should be investigating, like Hillary Clinton's emails. Pulling the Attorney General aside in the Oval Office right after former National Security Advisor Michael Flynn had pleaded guilty to lying to the FBI, again telling the AG that he needed to open an investigation of Hillary Clinton. The president told the Attorney General, quote, you'd be a hero. Trump wanted his Justice Department to investigate and prosecute Hillary Clinton, and he told them to do it repeatedly. And he repeatedly expressed frustration and anger that it was not happening under Attorney General Jeff Sessions. The president told NBC's Chuck Todd last month that giving Sessions that job was the worst mistake of his presidency. But he eventually fixed that mistake. He fired Jeff Sessions and got a new Attorney General, nominated and confirmed. And his new Attorney General got right to work, absolving the president of obstruction of justice immediately upon receiving the special counsel's report, keeping that report under wraps for weeks while he publicly painted it as an exoneration of the president. William Barr has also been hard at work launching the kinds of investigations that Donald Trump has waited for so long for, the kind that are premised on the idea that maybe the investigators of Russia's interference in our election and Americans accepting that interference, the people who investigated those things, well, maybe they are the real criminals. Another thing we know from the Mueller report and also from great reporting and from career government officials trying to raise the alarm is that it's not only the Justice Department that's been under this kind of pressure from the president. Donald Trump has also been trying very hard ever since taking office to bend the intelligence agencies to his will in the same way. And if Trump's repeated efforts to take over the Justice Department manifested themselves in the constant browbeating of Jeff Sessions, then his efforts to take over the intelligence community manifested in the awkward pauses of National Director of Intelligence Dan Coats.
Have you talked about this issue with Admiral Rogers?
That is something that I would like to withhold that question at this particular point in time.
Truly one of the greatest sound bites of the Trump era, courtesy of DNI Dan Coats. That was Coats back in 2017 being asked in the Senate about Trump putting pressure on him and pressure on the head of the National Security Agency, Mike Rogers, about the Russia investigation. Senator Richard Blumenthal asked Coats in an open hearing, so when both of you got pressure about the president on the Russia matter, did you guys ever talk to each other about that? Have you talked about this issue with Admiral Rogers? At which point Dan Coats paused for 9 seconds, which, as you can see, is an eternity in congressional hearing time. Dan Coats then actually scored a second Hall of Fame nominee for sound bites of our insane era in American politics. And it came during a conversation that he had with NBC's Andrea Mitchell at a security conference last year, where Coats criticized aspects of Trump's meeting with Vladimir Putin in Helsinki.
I do want to say we have some breaking news. The White House has announced on Twitter that Vladimir Putin is coming to the White House in the fall.
Say that again?
Vladimir Putin coming
Did I
to
hear
the...
you? Did I hear you?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's going to be special.
Honestly, a lot of people thought Coats would be out as Director of National Intelligence the next morning after that performance, but he survived. And for the record, Vladimir Putin never did visit. Coats stayed on long enough to deliver to Congress earlier this year a report from the intelligence community that contradicted Donald Trump at nearly every turn. Coats said that North Korea was not giving up its nuclear stockpile, that Iran was not taking steps to build a nuclear weapon, and that the Islamic State was not defeated. Trump responded by calling the intelligence community, quote, passive and naive, saying, quote, perhaps intelligence should go back to school. After meeting personally with Coats and the CIA director, Trump claimed that, in fact, they totally agreed with him. They had been misquoted in the official report that they themselves submitted to Congress. But the Trump tweet comes for everyone eventually, and this weekend it was Dan Coats' turn. The president tweeting that Coats is stepping down, and now Donald Trump will have the opportunity to install someone more to his liking at the top of the country's intelligence apparatus, just as he did at the Justice Department. Donald Trump is learning from his hiring mistakes, just as Jeff Sessions, Dan Coats apparently did not do enough protecting of Donald Trump, nor enough going after Trump's enemies. I mean, look at the bang-up job the new attorney general is doing. He's investigating the intelligence community itself, looking for evidence that they were all totally wrong about Russia trying to help Trump in 2016. Now, that is loyalty. But when Trump announced in May that he was granting the attorney general authority to selectively make public any classified information that he wants to, Dan Coats pushed back, warning about the consequences. Coats said the intelligence community would continue providing, quote, apolitical intelligence to the president. Well, we can't have that. And so now Coats is out, and the president is ready to finally have someone at the top of the intelligence community who thinks the investigation into Trump is a sham.
Americans need to know this as they listen to the Democrats and socialists on the other side of the aisle, as they do dramatic readings from this report, that volume 2 of this report was not authorized under the law to be written. It was written to a legal standard that does not exist at the Justice Department. And it was written in violation of every DOJ principle about extra prosecutorial commentary. I agree with the chairman this morning when he said Donald Trump is not above the law. He's not. But he damn sure shouldn't be below the law, which is where volume 2 of this report puts him.
Wow, that is Republican Congressman John Ratliff of Texas. Donald Trump's picked to be the nation's top intelligence official, telling Robert Mueller that while Democrats might want to talk about what's in his report, Congressman Ratliff is of the opinion that the report should never have been written in the first place. But hey, you know where there were crimes? President Obama's administration. That's what Ratliff told Fox News yesterday. That's what the new pick for National Intelligence Chief says ought to be gone after. The last Democratic administration, and especially the people involved in the Russia administration. So on a day like today, we do have to watch what the president says, because the things he's saying, the attacks he's launching and the targets he's choosing, well, it's so repellent that it has an actual tangible effect on our politics and our social fabric. So we are going to talk more this hour about that. But on a day like today, we also need to watch very carefully what the president is doing. Joining us now is Ned Price. He worked at the CIA for more than 10 years and thought he would spend his whole career at the CIA until Donald Trump was elected. And in February of 2017, Ned Price quit his job at the CIA in defiance of the president's posture towards the intelligence community. And he wrote, quote, "I didn't think I'd ever leave the CIA, but because of Trump, I quit." Thank you so much for being here.
Good to see you, Joy.
Great to see you, too. So, when everyone is a madman, the least mad person seems sane, right? Is that sort of the way that you would look at Dan Coats, that he may not have been heroic, but at least he seemed like somewhat credible?
Yeah, I think you're onto something. I think we have a tendency during this administration, it's perfectly understandable, to deify decent but flawed public servants. And I think that's how we should characterize Dan Coats. He was decent, a decent man, but he was certainly flawed. I think he could have done more to stand up for the men and women of the intelligence community when their work was being politicized. I think he could have done more to stand up to declassifications of things like the Nunes memo,
right.
These efforts that had no other ends except to protect Donald Trump. I think he could have done more and to said so publicly when Donald Trump asked him in the Oval Office to intervene with Comey and to intervene with Mueller to put this Russia investigation to bed. I think he should have sounded the alarm at the time, but I think we do have to judge Dan Coats by what he did do, and that is when push came to shove, he did speak truth to power before the American people. We know that the intelligence community continues to assess with high confidence that Russia was behind the attack on our election because Dan Coats said so. We know that Iran was abiding by the terms of the Iran deal because Dan Coats said so publicly in congressional testimony. We know that the intelligence community has concluded that North Korea almost certainly won't denuclearize because Dan Coats was very clear about that in public testimony and in his written work, and much to the ire of President Trump, as you noted.
Well, that is true. And I mean, he did tell us a lot, and he was also operating in a world in which Donald Trump made sure that the deputy director of the FBI lost his pension. I mean, the punitive nature of the rule of Donald Trump is a real thing. So does it surprise you that more people have not, either publicly in testimony, et cetera, come out and said what they know?
Well, it's a balancing act, right? And I think we saw Dan Coats do this every single day. There were a couple occasions where he spoke up. He did so after President Trump's summit in Helsinki with Vladimir Putin, where President Trump embraced Putin's assessment rather than the conclusions of our intelligence community that Russia was behind this attack. Dan Coats, to his credit, issued a statement. But you always have to balance when you have someone decent in that post, like Dan Coats, someone who wants to do the right thing day in, day out, knowing what will come after him will be so much worse. And I think now we've seen that nightmare come to life with the nomination of John Ratcliffe, who may well succeed Dan Coats.
And John Ratcliffe he seems to be, in a sense, a William Barr, in the sense that he's willing to take Donald Trump's view of everything, including the intelligence regarding whether Russia attacked this country's election to help Donald Trump. He seems to not believe that. He seems, I don't know, potentially maybe he'd be open to investigating the Obama administration, which you were a part of. How much danger are we in if Donald Trump puts a Donald Trump in charge of the National Intelligence Services?
Well, look, it's no secret that this presidency has been a continuous assault on the men and women of the intelligence community. It started even before Donald Trump took office. When he was a candidate in the final throes of the campaign, of course, he casually dismissed the then high-confidence findings of the intelligence assessment regarding Russia's aggression. When he was president-elect, he tweeted comparing our intelligence professionals to Nazis. On his first full day in office, he went out to the CIA headquarters, stood before the most solemn site in all of Langley, Memorial Wall, that at the time commemorated the 117 men and women of the CIA who had given their lives in service to their country and bragged about the size of the crowd at his inauguration the day before. All the while, he has politicized intelligence. He has suppressed intelligence. He has taken part in these politicized declassifications. But I have to say that if Ratcliffe is confirmed by the Senate, that would by far be the most dangerous assault we have seen to date on the men and women of the intelligence community and their work. And I say that because, as you said, he would be the Bill Barr of the intelligence community. He would be a Bill Barr, but who would keep all the secrets, who would know where the bodies are buried. You pointed to the president's bestowal to Bill Barr of declassification authority when it came to the Russia investigation. I think the key point there is the president had to take a proactive step. He had to bestow this upon the Attorney General. If Ratcliffe is in that position, if he sits atop the nation's 17 intelligence agencies, that won't be necessary to bestow that authority on him. It will be inherent to his job to declassify and to classify, to keep what the president wants secret and to declassify what the president wants out there for his own personal and political ends.
We're out of time, but could he apprise Donald Trump of what the contents of the counterintelligence investigations that are still going on about Donald Trump are?
He's not supposed to, but he would certainly be privy to that. And I think, as we've heard from Adam Schiff and others on the House Intelligence Committee, they continue to demand the full access, as is required by statute, to the counterintelligence findings that Mueller and his team collected over time. And they've yet to get those full findings. I think if John Ratcliffe is nominated and if he is, in fact, confirmed to this post, the Intelligence Committee can probably kiss their chances of seeing those findings goodbye.
It's pretty scary. More Bill Barr is not a good thing. Ned Price, former CIA intelligence officer and NSC spokesperson, thank you very much for being here.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. All right, we have a lot more to get to in this busy Monday night. We're going to talk with Reverend Al Sharpton, the latest target of Donald Trump's vitriol, and also with one of the latest Democratic members of Congress to call for an impeachment inquiry. Stay with us.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.